I remember vividly in 2011 in the tournament in Rome. For you guys who are fans of intuitive tennis, you know that I'm a huge Rafa fan. And at the tournament in Rome in 2011, Novak Djokovic beat Rafael Nadal in the final. And it was in this particular match where I understood the quality of Novak Djokovic's forehand, because in my opinion, it is the most versatile and the most consistent forehand in the history of tennis. And that has to be taken into account when we judge a forehand. Most people, when they think who has the best forehand in the history of tennis, of course they're going to go with somebody like Federer, Nadal, or maybe Alcaraz. And yes, those forehands might be more powerful than Novak's forehand. They might be flashier. They might be more stylistic. But I'm going to present you with a scenario. Let's say you take these four guys, Alcaraz, Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic, and you have a ball in the middle of the court, and you have to put your entire life savings on a player to make this forehand and hit a winner. Who would you choose out of these four guys? In my opinion, even though I'm the biggest Nadal fan of all time, I'm going to put my money on Djokovic. Let me go back to the match in 2011 in Rome when Djokovic beat Nadal in straight sets, and where I realized how good Novak's forehand was. And it's the fact that he is so versatile, where he can flatten the ball out if he wants to, but he can also play with a tremendous amount of spin. In that particular match, I felt like Djokovic's spin on the forehand was just as lethal as Nadal's spin, who arguably has the best topspin forehand in the history of tennis. So Djokovic has the ability to flatten the forehand out and also has the ability to hit with an extreme amount of topspin. And he does something on his forehand that you don't see from some of the other greatest forehands of all time, Nadal, Federer, or Alcaraz, where on those three guys, on 100% of their forehands, you're going to see the tip of the racket go towards the outside as they're going across the body. So they are applying topspin on every forehand. Now the trajectory might change sometimes, especially on someone like Federer, who hits the ball with spin, but also sometimes has a tendency to play lower than someone like a Nadal. But regardless of the trajectory of the ball, both Nadal and Federer play with a tremendous amount of topspin. Novak, on the other hand, will sometimes have the tip of the racket go through this way. This is something that you see on the WTA tour quite frequently, which I categorize as flat topspin. You will not see this on the ATP tour much, but you do see it from time to time on Djokovic. On the vast majority of Novak's forehands, however, he will go across the ball, where the tip of the racket goes from the outside across the body, this way, what most ATP players do on the forehand. So the fact that he has this ability to hit the ball flat, and he has the ability to play with a tremendous amount of topspin, makes his forehand more versatile than any other player in the top 100. But that's not the main reason why I think that Djokovic has the greatest forehand in the history of the game. It is simply the fact that he's the only player that I can think of that can play mistake-free tennis. I'm sure you wouldn't disagree with me if I called Novak Djokovic the greatest baseline player of all time. And what is a baseline player? Someone who has an incredible forehand and an incredible backhand. Now, Djokovic will often run around his backhands to hit forehands. So you can make an argument that 70% of the time when he's playing baseline rallies, Djokovic hits forehand. So if you call him the greatest baseline player in the history of tennis, it is because of his forehand that his baseline game is so strong. Why is his baseline game so strong? Because he's the only player that I can think of that can play mistake-free tennis. I recently did a podcast with Emma, who I frequently feature on my channel, and you should subscribe to Emma. She has a YouTube channel of her own called Tennis with Emma. And in this podcast, Emma was asking me rapid fire questions. Who has the best forehand? Who has the best backhand? And I said the name Djokovic a lot. And she asked me, why did you say Djokovic to all these shots? Are you serious that you think that Djokovic has the best forehand of all time? And I want you to listen to my response.
You said Djokovic a lot.
Yeah.
It was like, Djokovic. Really, you think Djokovic has the best forehand?
Yeah, I do think so. It's not the most powerful forehand. It's not the forehand that produces the most winners. The greatest forehands in the history of the game, which are obviously the big three, Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic, have the best forehands. Now, if you want to add like Alcaraz, his forehand is incredible too. If you want to add players from the past like Fernando Gonzalez. In my opinion, the best three forehands in the history of the game are Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer. And if you compare Djokovic's forehand to Nadal and Federer, again, at that elite level, I feel like Djokovic's forehand is the one that's least likely to break down in pressure situations. I feel like sometimes Federer will shank a forehand here and there. I feel sometimes Nadal will leave his forehand short. I feel that Djokovic's forehand is the most reliable one. It might not be as lethal, as aggressive as Nadal and Federer, but I feel like it's more consistent.
You see, I'm surprised that you didn't mention any of the newer, younger generation, like Alcaraz, Ruud.
I think Holger Rune's forehand is like a monster forehand, but I think we have to wait and see how consistent these guys are. But obviously, like all the youngsters have amazing forehands now.
Yeah.
But, having said this about the big three's forehand, I do feel there are technical reasons why this is the case, or why I believe that this is the case. I'm not going to say issues because they're not issues, but technical characteristics that make Djokovic's forehand less likely to break down compared to Federer and Nadal. I feel like Djokovic's forehand is more consistent.
Okay, can you tell me 2 or 3 characteristics on Djokovic's forehand that separate him from the others?
Okay, this is kind of a complex answer, but let's just say Djokovic has the tendency, he can flatten his forehand out too if he wants to. He can hit very hard and long and strong when he wants to. He can flatten the forehand out. But when he hits it with spin, I feel like there's a similar amount of spin between him and Federer. Nadal, of course, has the most spin, even though I've seen things where Federer's spin was measured similar to Nadal's as well. When you look at Federer, when he strikes his forehand at his worst, when you look at Nadal, when he strikes his forehand at his worst, I feel the fact that they are completely extended at the moment of contact gives them less area to make adjustments. I feel like because Djokovic has a slight bending in his elbow at the moment of contact, I think it's a little bit easier for him to make adjustments if there's a bad bounce, if there's some kind of change to the ball, because I feel that both Nadal and Federer are locked in at the moment of contact. And so because they have incredible footwork, maybe 2 of the best movers in the history of the game, in addition to Djokovic, they rarely have issues on the forehand, but they do sometimes. Like every now and then, Federer will frame some. Every now and then, Nadal will leave some short and also frame some and hit some long. Again, this is also connected to their mental state at the time. So I'm not going to put it all down to the technique, but I feel like Djokovic rarely has these little ups and downs on the forehand. I feel like the forehand is always going in, going in. And when he wants to, he can flatten it out and go hard, because I feel like technically it's a more simple movement. I feel like the movement of Federer and Nadal is more complex, it's more difficult. And when something is more complex, it can break down sometimes. Now, of course, a stroke depends on other factors that don't have anything to do with technique. In other words, the mental game of a player. There are other factors that will contribute to somebody making a shot or missing a shot. There's no doubt about that. And I also do believe that Novak Djokovic is mentally the strongest players that we ever have seen on the ATP Tour.